I now understand a lot about Bitcoin and what the investment thesis with Bitcoin is. But it really dawned on me, and it especially dawned on me when one of the guys I was talking to said, it's a value transfer network.
Michael, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Michael, thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. It's been a little while since we hung out together. But the question I have to ask you, because I didn't know this, is that you're actually a resident of Liberland, which is some kind of startup country near Serbia and Croatia that's built on blockchain. So, all right, you had me at what is that, and how are you a resident? Talk about that. It's crazy.
Well, I was hanging around a bunch of pretty libertarian, freedom-minded people, and they started talking about this startup country in the middle of Europe. And then a guy that was working for me actually, was a resident there and was on one of the organizing committees. And so I started getting involved with it. They, kind of sucked me into helping them put together a free trade zone in Serbia. And, I worked my way towards citizenship and residency because number one, I believe in financial freedom. Number two, I believe in political freedom. And number three, I believe in always having options. And so it's like, what the heck? Why not get involved with Libra? And it's been a fantastic group of people. And they actually got me further into, blockchain and real estate.
Well, it's interesting, right? So what does that have to do with blockchain at all? The
The
country.
entire governance is on blockchain, so it's out in the open, and so you can see the Constitution. You can see all the changes to the Constitution, and you can see, what all the if you pay taxes, taxes are voluntary, and what money is spent on and everything. So it's a transparent way to run a government.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you check it out, just Google Lieberland. It's kind of interesting. Like it looks like this weird made up thing, but there's some seriousness around it. I mean, it's like a serious thing. It's like it's a real thing. It's not like some made up thing that Michael made up. But Lieberland is interesting, and it's
What I always tell the people involved with it, it's like it's the ultimate real estate deal. Start your own country.
I know it. Yeah, we talked about that. Real estate guys, when we hung out, when there was someone talking about sovereign countries that are floating islands, right?
Right,
And that was
right.
the first time I had heard about that, and I was like, oh my gosh, sovereign countries that are floating islands, and if you don't like the government, you can just decouple and float away somewhere else. you know, I think that's really cool. But we're off topic. The topic, of course, is crypto blockchain. What does it have to do with real estate? Now, I know that you are. I mean, you're a big blockchain kind of guy now, but you weren't before. How talk about your journey into kind of embracing cryptocurrency and blockchain? Like, what did that look like?
Sure. Well, I've been in the real estate business since 1986, primarily in shopping centers. And we started our company in 1990 and primarily working with large institutional investors and larger shopping center projects. We've done a lot with triple net properties, and we were some of the first people to do demalling. So taking a mall and if it's vacant and didn't have a lot going on for it, we demalled it and repurposed it. And some of the highlights of my career, we've had movies in Wayne's World, the movie Wanted with Angelina Jolie and Morgan Freeman, and the Sopranos. So that's what you can get involved with when you do retail real estate. So, but as I said, I started hanging around with a lot of smart people. They're way smarter than me and way richer than me. And they were all talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and things like that. And they're primarily freedom-minded people. And so I didn't understand what was going on with Bitcoin. And I usually say to people that the reason why I didn't understand is because I went to a public school, so I can't do math. And I didn't understand. And so I kept, it didn't compute with me because I'm a hard asset guy. It's like, why not just tie it to real estate? Why not just tie it to gold? Why not tie it to something like that? And so when I now understand a lot about Bitcoin and what the investment thesis with Bitcoin is. But it really dawned on me, and it especially dawned on me when one of the guys I was talking to said, it's a value transfer network. And so when I coupled a blockchain with, well, it's like a phone system like Verizon or like AT&T, but instead of sending communications, you can actually send money, assets, or value. And so when I did that, it's like, okay, so you don't know how email works. You don't necessarily have to know how a blockchain works. All you need to do is know that if you put the asset up and somebody buys the asset and they put the money up, the value transfer goes through immediately. And it doesn't matter whether I'm here in Chicago, you're there in Virginia, or it's somebody in Singapore, or it's somebody, in Argentina. It goes through and it's worldwide.
It highlights the fact that I think when people say cryptocurrency, they confuse the technology with the investment vehicle. Like everybody hears Bitcoin, and the only reason people are in Bitcoin is they think they can get rich, right? But really, many people are more fascinated by the technology behind it, which is what you're referring to right now. So when you say cryptocurrency blockchain, you're not necessarily referring to an investment vehicle in the cryptocurrency itself. Is that right?
That is 100% correct. So if you look at blockchain, so Bitcoin is two different things. Number one, it's a network, and it's a value transfer network, and that's the Bitcoin network. And then there's Bitcoin, which is the token that's traded on. And so those coins are used to use the network. But also, Bitcoin has an investment thesis that there's only going to be 21 million of them made. And so it's going to be like digital gold. So it's a lot harder to, stuff your pockets with, giant things of gold. You can just have it all up in your head and walk out of a country like Venezuela, or, perhaps, hopefully not. But, if you need to walk out of the United States, you can have it all up in your head. And that's where your wealth is.
So crypto, Bitcoin on the one hand is a way to get money out of the system. Also easy to transfer instantaneously from one to another. When you're talking about the value network of transferring money or assets, it's like a wire transfer also. But
exactly,
a tie cryptocurrency or blockchain more to real estate, right? Because how does real estate even relate to Bitcoin or crypto, any of that stuff? Like, where's draw us the connection there.
Okay, well, so we're in the business of investing in value, and we're in the business of owning value. So and you are somebody that does multifamily syndications. So if I wanted to get into one of your, there's a few different ways to do it, but the simplest thing is that you have an apartment building, you want to sell it to me, we can tokenize that, and we can do the transfer, and the transfer can go through. And as long as I put up the money and you put up the apartment building and the transfer goes through, that's the simple thing. What I'm more interested in is syndications, and how you can make syndications more efficient, and how you can make syndications more accessible to a wider audience of people. Because as you and I both know, real estate is the best investment in the world. It's the most stable investment in the world. It's the only thing that gives you cash flow and all the rest of it. So I said, instead of like having people gamble in the stock market, what if we made it easier to invest in, commercial real estate that's income producing and all the rest of it?
All right, so that's interesting, Michael. Now we're getting somewhere. So how does tokenization or blockchain or any of this kind of stuff make syndications more accessible to more people?
The simple answer is that you and I both do probably typical 506c syndications, 506b syndications, so they're eligible for accredited investors. That whole process is all done in paper. So, there might be DocuSigns, there might be this, there might be that. But not only do you have to track all that on paper, and then you make your payouts in paper, and you might send checks out in paper. What this does is the shares are all the same. So let's say we have a Michael Blanc apartment, and let's just say for ease of use, because I told you I don't do math, all the investors, it's a total equity raise of $100,000, and each equity investor can put $10,000 in. So those shares, if we did it the traditional way, you know how to do that. You would distribute that and all the rest of it. With a security token offering, it would be exactly the same thing, except it would all be digital, and those shares would be recorded to a blockchain. And so the key thing about that then is those shares are now tradable. So after a 1-year lockup period, the investors in those shares could potentially trade them to accredited or non-accredited investors. And also, it helps you out because it makes it easier, number one, for you to keep track of your investors, makes it easier and less expensive for you to pay your investors. So with the security tokens, your investors can get paid as an ACH payment directly to their bank account, or they could choose to take their money in what's called a USD stablecoin. So it's a dollar stablecoin, or they could take it in some form of crypto. So your investors could be like, they might be US citizens, but they might be living in Costa Rica. So instead of having that all go through a US bank and then having to get it out of it all goes directly, their money goes with them.
Now, this got to be governed somehow. Does the SEC govern any of this stuff at all, or are you like outside the system?
This is 100% governed. These are so our Liberty Fund offering is a 506c. It's all the same regulations that you would have. The 1-year lockup period is something that's been approved by the SEC. All the trading is regulated. You have to do for your investors what's called a KYC and an AML. So you need to know your customer, and you need to make sure they're not doing money laundering. And you have to do your accredited investor checks. There's people out there that are doing things not legally, and we started messing around with this probably in 2019, and it took us over 2 years to like completely figure it out. We actually had to like explain to the tokenization platform how to do real estate legally and all the rest of it. So it is 100% legal, and it's a regulated per all the SEC regulations.
All right. So if an LP has a tokenized investment, let's say it's $10,000, like you said, and now under what circumstances can that person sell their shares? Can they sell part of their shares? Does it have to be the whole $10,000? And then what is the process of actually selling their shares?
Well, so that's a good question. It would all depend on the operating documents, but most of it. So, for example, in our fund, let's say somebody bought $100,000 worth, and each of the shares were worth $10,000. What this does, it allows them to do estate planning. So I've got 2 kids, and so I could give 30,000 of the shares to one son, 30,000 shares to the other son, and keep 40,000 for my wife and I. You could do any number of things like that. You could also just decide you're going to sell off part of them. And some of the other things that are coming down the pike is that unlike in a syndication now, you could potentially borrow against your shares so you could get margin. So if you like what your investment is, I'm invested with Michael Blanc and things are going fantastic, and I know things are going fantastic, you could potentially deposit your shares and borrow against them, like perhaps 50%, and free up some of that money to use for something like another investment, or if you just have one of those life emergencies or have to pay for a wedding.
This is very interesting, where technology actually solves problems, and one of them
Right.
is the only downside for investing in commercial real estate is a lack of liquidity, right? You're like,
Right.
oh gosh, you have them 100,000 for 5 to 7 years. Ah, that's awful, right? Everything else is super awesome. And what I'm hearing you say, that if you tokenize the investment, you actually create a market for that security that you can sell and get some liquidity out of.
Theoretically, I'd never tell anybody, like the people that were talking to me in like 2019, 2020, and still today, are all talking about this, massive liquidity. And I'm like, well, even on the stock market, if it's like, a thinly traded stock, there's not a tremendous amount of liquidity, but there's liquidity options. And so the liquidity options are, perhaps you can borrow against it. You could list it, and just, I could go to you and say, Michael, I've got this, investment in one of these properties with somebody else. Are you interested in investing in this? And we could just trade it peer to peer. So if we both agreed that the shares are worth $10,000, as long as you put up the $10,000 and I put up the shares, the trade goes through. You could also list them with a securities broker, and the securities broker could then sell them. And then there's these things called ATSs, which are mini exchanges. So there's much more liquidity options for you as an investor. And like I say, for sponsors, I believe this is going to really help sponsors take care of a lot of their investor management stuff that they've got, a lot of overhead with, dealing with investors and trying to service investors, making sure investors have the best experience possible. A lot of this stuff is automatically tracked on the blockchain, because at the end of the day, most people hear blockchain and they say, what is that? It's basically like a giant ledger. It's like a giant Excel spreadsheet that everybody can point to and say, this is the real ledger, and we can see that everybody agrees that this is the ledger.
Now, how does one do any of this stuff? And you mentioned by the by, there's tokenization platforms, et cetera. Like if we wanted to offer syndication on the blockchain, crazy stuff, how would one do it?
Well, you would, number one, I always recommend, and we have an event coming up this week, the Blockchain Real Estate Summit. And we did that event like last year, and we're doing it again this year, but it's all about education as to how sponsors can do this and how investors can invest in these type of things. But what we always start with, and it's the boring part, is the attorneys and the accountants. And so in order to go about it, you need your syndication documents, your offering memorandum, and your operating agreement. There's specific clauses in there that say these things at, the syndicators, these things can actually trade and be issued to a blockchain. So it doesn't mean, so what I always tell syndicators is that you don't necessarily have to go out and issue these to a blockchain. You don't have to go out and tokenize them. You don't have to do anything. But I would recommend in all your future documents, talk to an attorney that has experience with this, and at least put that in there so that you're ready for it if it becomes a thing, or if it becomes something that you want to do, or if your investors come to you and say, hey, there's all these people doing this, why can't you do this? You can just point to the documents and say, hey, we're already way ahead of you on that. We can do that. And now that there's a market, and now that there's, the tokenization platforms that are going to give you a good experience, we're considering doing this.
Interesting. So when are these tokenization platforms ready? Like, could one do it now? You get the right attorney, CPA. They attend your summit. They're like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then I want to say, let's go. Are these things actually ready for prime time?
I'm going to give you my honest answer, and no, they are not ready for prime time. And the reason why I say that, and I'm saying this as somebody that is friends with, has worked with, and actually issued tokens. They're still early adopter phase, and so the large majority of them are set up for crypto investors. And so we've had to go through and rework a lot of the stuff that, on the platform that we were working with, to say nobody knows, and I'm just going to throw out some buzzwords here, but none of my real estate investors know what a MetaMask wallet is. They don't even know what a crypto wallet is. And so if they have to, and I'm a guy that like actually has been doing this for a while and knows, what all this stuff is. It took me 2 days to set up a MetaMask wallet, and so if you're expecting real estate investors to jump into this, and that's why we had, problems with our fund, because there was a lot of people that it was just a stretch too far. There was just too many steps involved, and it was complicated and clunky. So we are working on trying to make that experience much better. It has to be like somebody just signing up for Fidelity or Vanguard, or even, for the kids out there, Robinhood. That's what the investor experience needs to be, and it's not quite there yet. The other thing that, we're working on is having it so that people don't necessarily have to know what a wallet is. It's like, this is your account, and your account follows you around the world. And so, it's called a wallet, but in essence, you log in, here's your investor portal, and here's how much you have, here's what things, if you wanted to list them, here's what you can do. And once all that's in place, which it's not quite there yet, but I'm like gonna go out on a limb and say that within the next year things are going to be much easier. You're going to see a bunch more people saying, yeah, this is for me now, because it's like easy. I all I got to do is pick the horse, which I like Michael Blanc, and Michael Blanc is doing this, so I'm gonna he's done a good job for me. That's what I'm interested in.
It's interesting. I think Bitcoin, crypto, I still don't think it's anywhere near mainstream because it's complicated. It's very
Right.
technical. It uses different words. And you're right. There's no reason to call something a wallet when it's just really another word for account. Well, then freaking call it an account. Okay. I get it's a checking account and a Bitcoin account. All right. I wrap my head around that.
Right.
Number one. And the other thing, just looking in from the outside in, me being a real estate investor and watching Bitcoin from a distance, I associate Bitcoin and cryptocurrency with volatility.
Right.
It's going way up, way down. Right now we're way up. We're way up. It's like like the US dollar stable coin. See, I don't know if a lot of people know that, but if I want to store basically cash equivalents in cryptocurrency, I can use the stable coin. Talk about that, because I don't know if a lot of people know this.
Yeah, well, there's things called stable coins out there, and so it's kind of like a bridge between Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of these other things. For example, you would want to use a USD stablecoin because instead of doing a bank wire where I'm wiring you money, like let's say I can give you a concrete example. I had to wire money to Dubai, and they wanted the exact slip, and they wanted to know, and then they wanted to be able to call the bank to say that the bank actually wired it. And 7 days later, the wire never got there because the wire was lost. So, and with sending like USDC, it's tied to the value of the dollar, but I could send you that money and you would know like pretty much within 1 minute whether the money was there or not. Whether you're in Virginia, whether you're on vacation in Bora Bora, or whether you're in Europe, the money just goes through instantly. So that's what the attraction is. And then furthermore, if you've got this USD stablecoin or any other type of cryptocurrency in your wallet, again, if I'm, vacationing in Panama, or if I'm like living, part-time in the winter because I don't like the winters in Chicago, so I want to like live down in Costa Rica, I have that money and I don't have to go through a bank to get my money. So that's, some of the conveniences. And that's what if you just forget what all the buzzwords are in blockchain and crypto, and if you just say value transfer networks, and I own my own assets now. So, for example, if they're invested in the Michael Blanc security token offering, each one of those shares that they have, they know they have it, and it's not in a file drawer. It's like that share follows them around. So if you're paying cash flow out monthly, if you're paying cash flow out quarterly, those shares can pay directly into your wallet, which is following you around the globe.
Now, what about concerns that I can lose my wallet, which I've done, or my wallet could be hacked? Like, how is that addressed in the crypto world?
Well, with normal cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, if your wallet is hacked, more than likely you're going to lose your stuff. And with normal cryptocurrency, there's a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of things, and they'll tell you that you can make 40%. And on that stuff, you just need to stay away from it because it's like it's kind of like a real estate deal. If it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And if you're doing something that has a 40%, you could there are people out there doing it, but there might be some risk involved. So you need to decide how much risk is involved. But with security tokens, since security tokens are regulated and since they're issued, and since you as the issuer, like Michael Blanc, or me as the issuer, Michael Flight, knows who it is, if your tokens get hacked, you could just tell us. And what we do is we burn those tokens. Those tokens are gone. And then, of course, we go through the process and reissue them. If you can't get into your wallet or something happens, again, we can reissue them. This is not cryptocurrency. These are regulated shares.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So where do you see this going? I mean, it sounds like we're in the super early adopter phase. You're obviously fascinated by it, right? But
Right.
you do see implications to how we transact real estate. Where do you see this going? Like, yeah, just paint us a picture.
Well, I do see that, number one, this essentially, like Bitcoin, if you even look at the white paper, it was set up as a payments network. And so, a lot of your stuff might be paid, online. We've got that now, but it's clunky. It's through credit cards, it's through ACH payments. So people might be paying their rent to you in some sort of cryptocurrency or some sort of stable coin. There might be transactions and contracts that are all done on blockchain and they're kept track of. So when certain milestones, for example, in a construction payout, if you're doing a construction project and the title company does certain payouts, now that might all be like put online. And so that, the title company is still going to be there, but it's trusted. And as soon as you can prove that these milestones are hit, it's released. And they're doing that with, gas exploration and gas, all the way through, to end delivery. There's companies out there right now tracking this stuff on blockchain. Walmart tracks a lot of fruits and vegetables on blockchain so that if they have to recall something for salmonella, they know exactly where the farm, where it was, and everybody that touched it through the process and where all those were distributed from. So that's one of the great things about it. It's like you're going to be able to get a better accounting and you're going to have a live accounting. But number two, what I see is that you're going to expose a lot more people because this is going to bring down the cost of actually issuing shares to investors. And so you're going to have a lot more people throughout the world. There's $280 trillion of real estate in the world. And if you and right now, like the cryptocurrency market is about 1 trillion, and the stock markets, I forget how many trillion they are, but real estate dwarfs everything. So if you can tokenize just a portion of that, you unlock all that value for people. So people can not only sell those things, they can borrow against it, use it as capital to create more capital. Or the greater thing is more investors throughout the world can actually invest in quality real estate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, things like liquidity, borrowing against it, that's not possible today.
Right.
I'm curious the regulators are going to have to jump in at one point, because if I can sell shares to anyone with some kind of cryptocurrency anywhere in the world, right? I don't know exactly who they are. I don't know how to satisfy money laundering. There's probably a process for that. I can only take like right now, there are tax implications for taking international money. I have to know that this is an international person, and there's certain paperwork I have to do. Now with Bitcoin, I don't necessarily know if they're overseas or not. I mean, it could be anywhere. Right. I'm wondering what's going to happen.
But investors, yeah, in this investors, so there again, there's a process. So each one of your investors, you do it now because most of your investors, but each one of your investors has to go through a KYC check, and they have to go through an anti-money laundering check to make sure that they're not on the Interpol list. You can't take investors from, in the United States. If you're doing an offering in the United States, you can't take investors from North Korea and certain other, and so the tokens are all coded for that. So if somebody is coming in, number one, they're not going to be able to invest in the token unless they've gone through this. And then if they're a US investor, they have to go through the extra step of proving that they are an accredited investor.
That's interesting. So you get basically you get an approved token if you talked about tracking these milestones, supply chain
Right.
milestones. So if you've gone through this verification and that check, then you basically get an approved token, and with that token you can do certain transactions. And if you don't have that approval, then you can't.
Right. So you're basically approved as an investor, and then you can own the token. So the tokens then are coded so that there's what's called a whitelist. So there's approved, places. So let's say a new investor comes in and they're in the UK. Well, that's an approved place. But let's say another investor comes in and they might just happen to unfortunately live in Iran. And so that's not going to be an approved place. Or somebody that has nothing to do with the regime in North Korea, but they're unfortunately not going to be able to invest in your thing because the laws of the United States. And the other thing is that if you issue these tokens, you can sell them to non-US investors, but you might have to comply with laws in Europe or some other place if you're actively marketing them in, let's say, Singapore or Europe or something like that.
It
So
is
there are regulations
it
throughout the
is
globe.
fascinating. If I'm an investor in the UK and I get all these certifications, I can now use that token with a variety of operators. I don't have to authenticate myself every single time. Someone brings me a bunch of paperwork about some money laundering check they've done and some background check. I'm like, I don't know. Like, how do you know this thing's real? Right. But if you have a token, now they can use that and it'll open doors for people. I think it's interesting. It is definitely interesting. Michael, it's been super interesting and fascinating on how we can apply blockchain to real estate. I just like where your mind's going with this stuff. How can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Well, we number one have the Blockchain Real Estate Summit. It's happening this week, so by the time this episode airs, it's not going to be around. But you can still go to the website, and there is going to be a replay that you're going to be able to do. We also publish information on tokenization up on that website, or they could go to our website, which is libertyfund.io. That's libertyfund.io. We have a special report on tokenization. They can sign up for it and get that report. It'll tell them a lot more about, how the tokenization process works. We also have a ton of education on the libertyfund.io website, and we're adding more and more education on the blockchainrealestatesummit.com website. And really, most of this stuff is about education. Liberty Fund also has more of a focus on triple net properties. So if you ever wanted to learn anything about a triple net property, how they work, and shopping centers, I primarily work with retail real estate. So that's what it is. But if you're interested in that, by all means, we try to put out as much educational content as possible.
Really awesome, Michael. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Michael.